Yeah, everybody, I was vibing to Inabukamari and then this dropped. Alright, here we go.
It's been a little over a week since I last talked about Parlo on this channel, and a lot has happened, especially with everything involving Wolfgang. Just a few days ago, Wolfgang released a 40-minute response video laying out his side of the situation, and after watching it multiple times, I can say with full confidence that it's somehow even worse than the documents that were already made public by Parlo and him before. In this video, I'm going to go over the newest updates surrounding Parlo, explain where things currently stand with him, break down Wolfgang's response in detail, and hopefully bring this entire situation to a close. Before we get into everything, please make sure to like the video, subscribe.
A lot of messages while Wolfgang only deleted one.
To the channel and leave a comment with your thoughts so I can.
Here, let me. Bro, no, fuck. This is the wrong shit. No, fuck. Bro. Peter Carnage.
Thoughts so I can actually see where everyone stands on this situation. Now, before I explain all the new information, here's a quick recap of what happened last time so everyone watching has the proper context. The situation originally started with two documents that went public, one from Parlo and one from Internet Adjacent, also known as Wolfgang. Instead of just explaining what happened, both documents went into graphic, unnecessary detail about their relationship and in-person encounters, all while their audience was mostly minors. Parlo even described objects by name, which made people question his judgment and how he handles his platform. At first, Parlo wanted me to defend him. He privately asked me to cover his side and help clear things up. But after reading everything, I realized Later that night, he went on a live stream and that's the context for everything in this update. Now, before we speak about Parlo, we need to speak about Wolfgang's video, which in my opinion is full of many lies and arguably much more disgusting and disturbing than Parlo's document. And for those who saw Parlo's document, you know I don't say this lightly. Before I break down why I believe Wolfgang is lying, I need to make something very clear. What I'm about to read is simply a summary of Wolfgang's statements, not the truth and not my stance, just the version of events he wants people to actually believe. I'm laying this out first so you guys fully understand his claims before we get into the actual evidence and contradictions. Wolfgang's 40-minute long response video is basically him trying to explain his side of the situation while insisting that most of the accusations against him are lies, exaggerations, or misunderstandings. He keeps saying that this will be the only time he talks about it before returning to normal content. He starts with the allegation, explaining that Parlo verbally said yes to almost everything, both in DMs and in person, and anytime Parlo actually said no, he respected it. He argued that Parlo only showed discomfort through body language and said that he can't be blamed for missing subtle cues, especially because he struggles with reading body language and is being evaluated for autism. Wolfgang also claims Parlo constantly changes his story, saying nothing criminal happened, then calling it privately, and then using the word alleged publicly. He then walks through 3 days of their meetup trying to frame everything as mutually agreed. He says he never opened the only brought the Cinderella toy because Parlo asked him to, and that all acts were consensual. On the second night, he says Parlo didn't want to do anything and he backed off. And on the third night, he said that Parlo chose the timing before their night out and agreed to shower together. Wolfgang says that the recording Parlo took of it actually proves his story is consistent. Next, he tackles the accusations involving someone named Avalon. Wolfgang claims the entire allegation is baseless and claimed that Avalon himself denied and that all topics were only discussed after Avalon turned 18. He says that the 18+ server situation was him just not realizing the server had an age restriction and nothing was ever sent while Avalon was underage. In his view, the allegation only resurfaced because Parlo needed a villain after losing his channel. Wolfgang then
oh, wait, here. I can just... because I already saw the video, so...
To understand Wolfgang's version of events, we need to talk about why his response video doesn't hold up under even basic fact-checking. Once you start comparing what he says to the actual evidence, his past behavior, and his own recordings, it becomes very clear that this video is far from the truth. One of the biggest problems with Wolfgang's arguments is that he tries to shift nearly all responsibility onto Parlo for feeling uncomfortable during their meetup. His entire defense hinges on the idea that Parlo should have been clearer, that Parlo didn't say no.
Yo, whoa, what happened?
To basically
Love Roblox?
Fuck you.
Earn Roblox digital gift cards with Microsoft
Is that
Rewards.
LeBron James?
Basically ignore him moving
Love Roblox?
Bro, I
Earn
literally just
Roblox
fucking.
digital
Oh
gift
my
cards
god.
with Microsoft
I literally
Rewards.
just fucking-
Sign up for
I swear to God, if it
forward.
Alright.
Now that you understand Wolfgang's version of events, we need to talk about why his response video doesn't hold up under even basic fact-checking. Once you start comparing what he says to the actual far from the truth. One of the biggest problems with Wolfgang's arguments is that he tries to shift nearly all responsibility onto Parlo for feeling uncomfortable. Parlo didn't say no loudly enough, and that Wolfgang simply failed to interpret his body language. But this is the exact same excuse Wolfgang used in a completely separate situation at Anthrocon, where someone else said he crossed their boundaries. In that case, just like now, Wolfgang claimed he didn't understand their body language and insisted that any discomfort was the other person's fault for not educating him properly. The same excuse appears in multiple allegations across different years, different people, and different environments. It stops being an excuse and starts being a pattern. And in this situation specifically, Wolfgang leaves out the most important context. Parlo didn't rely solely on body language. In the recording Wolfgang himself chose to play, Parlo openly admits that he felt pressured, that he didn't know how to say no, and that he went along with things because he was afraid of upsetting Wolfgang or creating conflict.
But that was
It's
after.
all right there, in Wolfgang's own evidence, and instead of addressing it, Wolfgang pretends it somehow helps his case. It doesn't. It proves Parlo was uncomfortable and did not feel safe or confident saying no, which completely destroys
Which means
Wolfgang's
both of
argument
them
that everything
couldn't
happening
fucking
between
do
them was
anything. Both of them weren't in the wrong or in the right in that situation. Because, again, both of them couldn't communicate to each other. They were, like, how do I do, like, a metaphor? Or, like, so, imagine you're talking to a Helen Keller, but you're an alien. I know it's fucking weird. So both of you can like kind of like hint each other what you're doing, but you don't understand each other's language. Like the alien doesn't understand Morse code or English, or not Morse code, fucking binary or English, and the Helen Keller can't fucking understand the alien's language. So if you have both of them, they can't really communicate to each other that well. So the alien and Helen Keller have to like kind of hint to each other. But if both of them have problems socially, I know it sounds weird, but if both of them have social problems, then that might start getting difficult, you know, because the alien and Helen Keller, they can't like talk to each other normally like how other people would, and they won't be able to like catch and interpret those hints and messages. You feel me? All right.
freely initiated and mutually enthusiastic.
Like start of the thing. Oh, for goodness sake, my flashlight's not working. I just felt kind of pressured to do stuff for you because I didn't want to make you feel upset if I didn't do anything.
You can tell me no when it comes to that stuff. You don't have to.
I know, but I felt afraid that if saying no would just piss you off because I spent about 1,000 on that ticket. But I mean, I was just saying things that was.
I even told you we don't have to do stuff until December if you want.
I mean, I tried not to necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
The full picture becomes even clearer when you realize Wolfgang is trying to argue consent based on extremely selective moments. He points to the second night when Parlo said he didn't want to do anything and Wolfgang backed off, as if one isolated refusal somehow retroactively erases every other moment of hesitation or discomfort. But consent doesn't work like that. Someone telling you no once doesn't erase the pressure they felt on other days. Someone agreeing out of guilt or fear is not enthusiastic participation, and someone feeling obligated because they spent money is not meaningful consent. Wolfgang never acknowledges this. Instead, he hides behind the idea that he struggles with cues and therefore cannot be held responsible for not noticing when someone is uncomfortable. That might explain missing small cues, however it does not excuse pushing forward in situations where the other person's internal discomfort is obvious from their own words, from their tone, and from the entire emotional dynamic surrounding the trip. If anything, someone who admits that they struggle to understand boundaries should be even more cautious, not less. But this whole "it's not that deep" attitude completely collapses the moment Wolfgang reaches the Avalon situation, which is the part he tries the hardest to bury.
Is that
Wolfgang
Pikachu?
acts like the allegation came out of thin air, but the actual timeline shows the complete opposite. Avalon was still 17 when Wolfgang was discussing a three-way with him and Parlo, and the messages prove it. The original DM where Wolfgang initiated the conversation was sent on the night of September 22nd, while Avalon was still a minor. And because Wolfgang is an American citizen, this is not just awkward. Under US federal law, the age of consent for internal travel is 18 regardless of the country you're flying to. You cannot travel for the purpose of activity with someone under 18, even if that person lives in a place where the local age of consent is lower. Wolfgang was openly planning a meetup with someone who was still 17 at that time. To make things worse, Wolfgang misrepresented Avalon's entire perspective. In his video, he tries to claim that Avalon denied being, but what Avalon actually said was that he does not know what to call what happened to him, not that Wolfgang is innocent. And victims not knowing the terminology for what they experienced doesn't magically erase the situation. Avalon has repeatedly told people that he feels like a victim. The only thing he was unsure about was the exact label. Wolfgang twists that confusion into a debunk, which is manipulative and deliberately misleading. The screenshots also show Wolfgang deleting messages, hiding context, and selectively presenting only the parts that make him look better. Entire chunks of the DMs from the night of the discussion disappeared, such as messages that were sent at 10 o'clock that were removed later on. Avalon himself had to repost screenshots of Wolfgang forwarding messages to him while he was still 17, only for Wolfgang to delete those same messages afterward. Wolfgang also continued conversations days later. Avalon was still repeating things Wolfgang said to him on call, including comments about roles and needing a third participant. All of this happened before Avalon had even turned 18. Wolfgang also asked Avalon if he could use a persona Avalon designed in order to commission artwork. These are not the actions of someone who thought Avalon was an adult. These are the actions of someone who knew exactly what he was doing and hoped nobody would ever see the messages. All of this directly contradicts Wolfgang's claim that the three-way idea only started after Avalon turned 18. The evidence shows the opposite. Wolfgang initiated conversations with a minor and forwarded messages to that minor and then tried to quietly erase the paper trail. Once again, instead of addressing any of this honestly, he tries to drown it out in jokes, tangents, and attempts to humiliate Parlo. When he reaches the furry art, the claims or the hygiene comments, he does the same thing. He minimizes everything, redirects blame, and tries to make the audience laugh with him so they forget what he's actually being accused of. The most revealing part comes at the end of this video. Instead of closing with accountability or any kind of sincerity, Wolfgang launches into a bitter rant where he calls Parlo a lost cause, says he regrets ever treating him like a human being, and literally tells people to treat Parlo like a circus animal. That's not someone defending themselves.
What was that?
And literally tells people
where
he calls Parlo a lost cause, says he regrets ever treating him like a human being, and literally tells people
what the fuck was that?
People to treat Parlo like a circus animal.
Mom?
That's not someone defending themselves, that is someone lashing out because their entire narrative is falling apart. Now before we move on to the Parlo segment, we need to talk about something that pushes Wolfgang's behavior into a territory that's not just manipulative, but genuinely alarming. Somebody named Alex came forward with new information about what Wolfgang was saying privately during this whole situation, and it paints a picture that is far darker than anything Wolfgang admitted to in the video. According to this Alex person, Wolfgang was talking about wanting to marry Parlo and even adopt children with him. Let that sink in for a second. These two had only been talking regularly for only maybe 2 months at most, and Wolfgang had already spiraled into some imaginary domestic fantasy where they were building a family together. There's absolutely no justification for involving future children in a relationship that did not even exist yet and barely left the runway. It's delusional, obsessive, and crosses a line that should make anyone uncomfortable. And to be completely clear, Parlo had no knowledge of this. He did not know Wolfgang was fantasizing about raising kids with him, and he definitely did not consent to being pulled into that kind of fantasy. That was something Wolfgang created entirely on his own, behind his back, while also trying to pressure him emotionally. The moment it became clear that a meetup might not happen, Wolfgang allegedly told Alex that he was—
Alright. I don't know if it's I don't know US law that much. Like, I'm not a lawyer, but like I don't think it's illegal to think about somebody in a certain way without their consent. Like, again, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, I bet $10 on it that's not illegal. All right. Like, you just think about it in your head and don't tell it to anybody. I mean, he was telling it to somebody else, but like it's not that harmful, right? Like, I don't know. Fuck. I'm just gonna hit play.
He was going to
Oh fuck.
down sleeping until he did not wake up.
As soon as it was pretty much clear that the trip wasn't going to happen, that's when he snapped. That's when he went into my DMs, and I can show you the DMs. He was like, Paula's only interested in me for my body. None of them are responding to me quick enough. He sent me pictures of himself in a hospital bed, and he said that he was going to down sleeping until he didn't wake up.
That is not normal conflict or frustration or
Wait,
disappointment.
who?
Going to down sleeping until he didn't wake up.
That is not normal conflict or frustration or disappointment. That is someone weaponizing threats to force an outcome they want.
Harlow. Harlow, bro. I'm not even gonna fucking say anything because you already know what's up.
It is emotional, it is manipulative, and when you combine it with the marriage fantasies and the future kids talk, it becomes extremely concerning. None of this aligns with the harmless narrative Wolfgang tries to present in his 40-minute long rebuttal. It shows that he was not simply hurt or embarrassed by Parlo, he was forming an inappropriately intense emotional fixation, attaching long-term fantasies to someone he barely knew, and using threats as leverage when reality did not match the fantasy he built. And with that context on the table, we can finally move on to Parlo, because while Wolfgang lies constantly in his response, Parlo has his own issues that deserve the same level of scrutiny. The first thing that needs to be said is that Parlo was nowhere near as transparent in his document as he wanted people to believe. He somehow wrote a whole encyclopedia about his life full of details that nobody asked for, yet somehow managed to leave out the parts that actually mattered. It's honestly kind of hilarious that he described every toy, every position, every embarrassing detail imaginable, but conveniently forgot to mention the part where he was basically asking Wolfgang to bring the Cinderella toy like it was a souvenir from Disneyland. When you look at the screenshots, the missing context becomes impossible to ignore. These messages make it clear that Parlo was not some passive bystander being dragged along. He was repeatedly initiating and escalating things. When Wolfgang asks about freak tonight or not, Parlo instantly replies with yes. He tells Wolfgang that he cannot eat because he is preparing for it. He then reacts to the tripod delivery with wonder what the tripod will be used for. He also sent messages like leave me and shaking on camera and make me on camera. None of these messages appear in the document, even though they completely contradict the narrative he tried to present. Even in the messages involving other people, Parlo expresses intent in being included as long as everyone else involved was comfortable. These are not small omissions. These are massive pieces of the story that Parlo intentionally left out, and the only reason we know about them is because Wolfgang screenshotted them. And that's the big problem here. Parlo chose to share 90% of the embarrassing story, but he hid 10% that makes him look just as responsible. That's not transparency. That is selective honesty designed to shape a narrative. And when both people in a situation are lying by omission or exaggeration, you end up with exactly what we have here. A complete disaster where nobody is telling the truth. Before I end off the video, I want to bring up something that honestly had me laughing out of disbelief. I heard from a few people that Wolfgang was apparently planning on taking all this to court, and then almost immediately after being called out, he changed his Discord name to please leave me the f alone, I'm leaving for 1 year from this internet. Which, you know, is a pretty strong pivot for someone who claimed he wanted a legal battle. And listen, Wolfgang, if you genuinely want to take this to court with Parlo, then be my guest. Truly, I encourage it. But you might want to stop and think about what a courtroom would actually drag into the light. Because the moment lawyers start digging, we're not talking about your side of the story anymore. We're talking about your bizarre Diddy versus Epstein dynamic with Parlo. You two were basically running your own freak-off competition, and on top of that, you had these long-term fantasies about involving kids and a future family with someone who didn't even know about it. If this ever reached a judge, they're going to want answers about Avalon too. They're going to want to know why a United States citizen was sending group plans to someone who was still 17 at the time. And whether you like it or not, that's the type of thing that does not stay private once lawyers get involved. The courts in the UK might have a few questions for you, and those questions tend to end with handcuffs rather than sympathy. And just so it's clear, I'm not saying either of these two are good people in this situation. Parlo is far from innocent, but Wolfgang, his behavior goes into territory that is significantly more alarming. Avalon was a minor during parts of this, and messages speak for themselves. So while I'm not going to label anyone with anything legally loaded, I think viewers can draw their own conclusions about who crossed which line.
Nah, crazy, bro. Crazy.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking.
Boy,